Do we have your permission to broadcast this interview in radio and television?
As long as you promise I get executed.
I'm not going to say the death penalty is wrong because I'm not in a position to judge it.
I'm ready to get out. This place is horrible. It's hard to put in words.
The day after the shootout, when I woke up in the hospital, I knew.
Okay.
I'm ready to get out of this place. And I can't get anything better but a license.
And I pretty much accepted it then. I'd screwed up and I knew what was going to happen.
Number 2, Jamie Lurch McCoskey. Apparently everything is big in Texas, including their slayers. Jamie Lurch McCoskey is one such example. He left a deep imprint on the world, but not in a good way, and this is the story of his crimes. At approximately 6 or 6:30 p.m. on November 13, 1991, an engaged couple returned to their apartment complex from a brief shopping trip. They went upstairs to their apartment, and the eventual victim unlocked the door, leaving the keys in the lock until they could get the groceries inside. As he turned to remove the keys from the door, he encountered Jamie McCoskey standing in the doorway. McCoskey unzipped his jacket to reveal a hunting knife in a scabbard in the waist of his pants. When asked what he wanted, McCoskey responded that he wanted a ride and they were going to take him where he needed to go. The victim agreed to take McCoskey where he wanted to go, on the condition that his fiancée be allowed to stay behind, but McCoskey insisted that she come along. McCoskey instructed the man to go to a gas station and put gas in the car, which he did. 2 or 3 blocks away from the station, McCoskey decided that he wanted to ride up front in the passenger seat so he could get out quickly in case a police officer pulled them over. After McCoskey and the woman changed positions, McCoskey instructed the driver to get onto the highway I-10 eastbound. While they were on the highway, McCoskey apparently made several contradictory statements, including 1. He was going to slay the couple, 2. He just needed a ride and he knew no one would volunteer, 3. He knew how to slay people using martial arts techniques, and 4. He was doing this for someone else who wanted him to steal the car. He was obviously playing games with them for his own amusement. Eventually, McCoskey instructed the driver to exit I-10 and directed him, somewhat indirectly, to an embankment in the middle of an empty field. Apparently, McCoskey was looking for an isolated place. After the car was stopped, McCoskey took the keys and proceeded to a Suburban parked nearby to tell its occupants that the land was private property and they needed to leave. After a brief conversation with McCoskey, the occupants of the Suburban left. McCoskey returned, kind of jumpy, grabbed the victim around the neck, pulled him down, and put a knife to his throat. McCoskey then ordered the woman to handcuff the decedent's hands behind him. He then got into the driver's seat and figured out how to drive the car. As McCoskey drove in the direction of the couple's apartment, the victim attempted to tell him that the woman was pregnant and asked him not to hurt her. McCoskey's response was that he better shut up and not make him mad. McCoskey then told them that he was going to leave the victim with some friends and then drop the woman off at the apartment, and after leaving the apartment he would call his friends to release the man. This way, he could ensure that the two would be too scared to call the police. However, as they neared the apartments, McCoskey turned away and eventually came to an empty house close to the freeway. McCoskey took the woman into the house at knife point, proceeding to attack her. He then returned her to the car and took the man into the house. The next sound the woman heard was something which made the hair on her body stand on end. The woman then jumped from the car and fled across a gravel road and through a field to a nearby home. The occupant of the house would not allow her to enter, but then McCoskey appeared with a knife in hand, shaking his head. The occupant let the woman in and locked the door, whereupon she then called 911 while McCoskey fled in the couple's vehicle. When the police arrived on the scene, they found the man's body inside the empty house. The police eventually located McCoskey and arrested him. Upon his arrest, they noticed knife scabbards strapped to both his belt and his right leg. The knife used in the knifing was located a few feet away from him on the floor. Apparently, this hasn't been McCoskey's first rodeo. His first brush with the law came in his youth in 1981, when he was committed to juvenile custody of the Texas Youth Council for an unnamed but apparently serious offense. That had only been the beginning of a long and illustrious career as a violent criminal. It was followed closely by a 1983 conviction for kidnapping, for which McCoskey received shock probation. The probation was revoked later that year after McCoskey committed an attack. While in the penitentiary, McCoskey committed several rules violations, including 5 fights and 4 incidents of striking or threatening an officer, 1987 convictions for misdemeanor attack and possession of marijuana, as well as a 1992 incident of striking another inmate in the Harris County Jail with a chisel, cracking his skull. What followed were multiple incidents of violence with McCoskey right in the middle of it all. Unfortunately for his last victim, his criminal career ended with his demise, with the long arm of the law catching up to him a bit too late.
So-called victim in my case wanted us to go out there so he can retrieve the money that he took from a girl that was living with. Now that I've got a date, I don't have a problem disclosing that. During the day, I would put my money, well, I get off like at 2 at night. During the night, I put my money inside of a...
So the victim wanted to go to Beaumont.
Yeah. See, I was running haunted houses. She went to the same guy that I bought dope from, weed. And I always told her to stay a couple blocks from Chester Drawer, and the girl that was living with me took the money and tried to double it up down the street and don't follow me. When she found out who I was, and she went up there the day that I was at work, he jacked her. You know what that is, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Said, I want to buy this acid.
As a result of his fatal actions, almost 22 years to the day of his last crime, Jamie met his maker when he was neutralized by the authorities at Walker County, Texas. A jury found McCoskey guilty of capital slaying in November 1992 and sentenced him to the gallows.
I told him, this girl is my woman. You took that money and I want that money back. So I came over there. He didn't know me at the time. Met him out in the parking lot because he just got back from a grocery store. He gave me the baloney, but he didn't have the money, but he knew a guy that had money that owed him. You know, if the inmates are going to listen to it, they don't want to listen to people that are in favor of killing them. You have 2 attorneys that are for the death penalty, regardless what they tell you, or or the civilians that are against the death penalty. I'm not like they are. I speak what's on my mind. I don't try to sugarcoat something. You're going to come out and admit it, do some research, regardless if they're in the favor of it. Like I've told you, I'm not against the death penalty.
The day after his conviction, after entering the courtroom, McCoskey picked up a heavy oak chair and threw it at the prosecutors. The chair flew 10 feet, hitting one prosecutor on the arm and grazing another before crashing into the jury box rail. "That's for lying in court," he shouted at the prosecutors.
Do we have your permission to broadcast this interview in radio and television?
As long as you promise I get executed, I'm ready to get out of here. This place is horrible. It's hard to put in words.
Okay.
I'm ready to get out of this place. And I can't get anything better but a license.
Number 1, Earl Forrest. The incident perpetrated by Earl Forrest was one of the darkest chapters of Dent County's history, and Forrest, in every way, embodies the unleashed demons which still haunt that community. In an interview, Forrest claimed Smith didn't hold up her end of a drug deal and never delivered on her promise. That betrayal, Forrest says, is what led him to get drunk on the morning of December 9, 2002, drive to her home and gun her down in cold blood. That day had been like any other when Earl had arrived at his victim's house. Drunk out of his senses he had been, but not enough to be incapacitated. He had driven to Smith's home in the southern Missouri town of Salem and had demanded that she fulfill her promise to buy a lawnmower and mobile home for him in exchange for introducing her to a source for methamphetamine. Earl's second victim, Wells, had been visiting Smith at the time. An argument ensued and Forrest shot Wells directly in the face. For him, it had been a definite case of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. After doing away with Wells, Earl had shot Smith 6 times and had taken a lockbox full of meth valued at $25,000. He had fled to the safety of his own home in a useless attempt to get away with what he had done. The first chance he got, Forrest injected himself with the meth back at his place on Dent County Road 2313. The police had finally triangulated his position and quartered him like a dog in his own home, where a gun battle between Forrest and the law enforcement officers occurred. After shooting up, Forrest slayed Barnes when she arrived on scene with Sheriff Bob Wofford to investigate the 2 slayings. Wofford was shot but not fatally injured in the ensuing gunfire. Forrest was apprehended after being shot twice during the ensuing standoff. According to witnesses, he put some meth in his mouth when he got injured.
He just started walking up, and he was behind her. And when I pulled my gun out, and he pulled his out, and we started shooting at each other. You know, they got out of the car,
Crawled to the door and yelled, "I surrender, we need help, people down." Forrest's girlfriend, Angela Gamblin, was also shot in the burst of gunfire, though she and Wofford survived along with Forrest. Apparently, Forrest had been an old hand at his dirty games. He began dealing drugs in high school when he wanted to be the popular renegade. By his early 20s, he graduated to selling speed and meth up and down the West Coast. Many people believe Forrest didn't deserve any more attention that he's already gotten. He was selfish in his substance use and greedy in his dealing. At the height of the meth epidemic, he conspired to import pounds of the drug. Worst of all, he was reckless with violence and willing to slay if it meant protecting his macho image. Forrest lived his life wanting to be called a kingpin and getting respect for his tough attitude to the world. His goal was for others to label him a badass, and he was willing to go to great lengths to uphold that persona. Forrest was a fool, too simple and too stupid to know right from wrong.
She's the one that had arrested me for absconding parole back in '98. You know, I felt she was disrespecting me in the worst way. Yeah, it's not. It wasn't even about a lawnmower. It was about the fact that no one respects you, they'll treat you right. They won't try to pull any nickel and dime bullshit on you. You know, get something from me and thinking, yeah, you ain't gonna do nothing. Psychological problem with me, more than one, but you know, I don't feel things.
As a last-ditch attempt to dodge his fate, attorneys for Forrest claimed that their client suffered a brain injury years ago, and that a PET scan conducted after his conviction confirmed it. They had also argued in an earlier appeal that the scan should have been conducted before his conviction and the results made available to the jury, but the Missouri Supreme Court upheld his conviction and penalty sentence in a 2009 ruling.
Thinking I could leave California and get away from the shit when I was convicted of 3 first-degree murders. Time and place, yeah, I guess so. I'm not going to say the death penalty is wrong because I'm not in a position to judge it. The day after the shootout, when I woke up in the hospital, I knew, and I pretty much accepted it then. I'd screwed up and I knew what was going to happen.
Every story has an end, and Earl's end was as violent as his life and what he put his victims through. Forrest was convicted of 3 counts on December 17, 2004, and sentenced to the gallows. Earl Forrest was the 1,436th person put down in the U.S. since 1976, the 87th person sent to demise in Missouri, and the 1,261st person exposed to the lethal injection. He was interviewed to find out whether his years on the row had blunted the brazenness of his tone and if the looming specter of demise had changed his soul. Apparently, his soul was as black to that day as it had been before. That's all we have for you, folks. Join us next time.